Hello. Hello, better. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Beauchamp, and I'm a mobile engineer with Kii Corporation. And I'm also the developer evangelist for one of our products called Kii Cloud. And today I'm here talking about a new emerging set of services that's being labeled AMBASS, or Mobile Backend as a Service. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Backend as a Service. Well, this set of technologies is really focusing on mobile applications. And it's used specifically for being able to rapidly deploy and develop mobile applications. So to get started, I just want to do a very, very short history of the evolution of mobile applications over the past few years. And I don't want to get back too far into feature phones and all that. I want to start specifically at kind of the beginning of the smartphone boom, when iOS started coming out and Android as well. So when this happened, the majority of users were probably people like us, early adopters, very tech savvy, and open to new kinds of technologies. Compared to today, it was amazing at the time, but data plans were very, very slow. So a lot of the apps that were available on the market limited their connectivity because it was such a terrible user experience in so many different cases. Another thing is there just wasn't a lot of money in apps. I mean, the user base was still growing. The market was still very naive. So people weren't making a whole lot of money, so there wasn't really a developer rush yet. And at this time, full stack applications were very expensive to make, especially if you were a small team of people. You really had to build the whole thing on your own. There weren't a lot of tools already available for you. So just in the past few years, things have changed pretty dramatically. I mean, users are utilizing multiple devices. So a lot of people have an Android phone and maybe an iPad, or an iPhone and an iPad, or an iPhone and a Nexus. And they assume all these devices should be connected all together all at the same time. And a pretty amazing statistic is that there were about 150 million smartphones being sold every quarter. So you can tell that the user adoption problems that were existing in the beginning of the smartphone boom are no longer happening. Now, especially with 3G and LTE becoming worldwide, it's very, very easy to get Wi-Fi-like speeds anywhere in the world. So users are expecting apps to be connected and be very, very fast. So as a mobile application developer, how do you keep up with your user expectations? This is a big issue today. And the solution is, well, in a lot of cases, you need your own mobile backend. Unless, of course, you're using a mashup or using APIs or something like that. If you're developing your own service, you're going to need your own servers and your own backend running. So some of the common features of a mobile backend I have listed above. And one of the keys is manage and storing user information. So this can be things like user authentication, user registration, account management, profile management, and things like this that you're finding to be very, very common, especially with apps being so social. The second facet is managing and storing application data. So the actual information that's being stored in your system, whether it's news stories, game scores, anything like this, that you want to be able to store in the cloud, to be able to sync to multiple devices, to be able to back up, or to share with friends, whatever your use case may be. Finally, a big topic is user analytics. So in order to build an app into a business, you really want to know what's going on inside of your app. You want to be able to track your users, see what they're enjoying, see what they're using, and tailor it for them specifically. So tracking this app behavior and tracking analytics is very, very important. So at a minimum, if you're building your own backend, you're going to need the following. You're going to need one or more databases, depending on your deployment. You're going to need one or more servers, maybe tied together with a load balancer or something like that. And you're going to need to write your own server-side code to be able to handle all of the methods and all the functions that you expect your app to make. And of course, this is going to require engineers. If you're going to do it yourself, you're going to get a team. It's still going to be a lot of time and a lot of money sunk into engineers. So some of the current solutions for solving some of the problems that I mentioned. Well, let's start with this, sorry. So if you want to create your own backend, if you want to spin it up yourself. This is the hard way to do it, and especially in the beginning of mobile app, in the beginning of the smartphone boom, this is pretty much what you had to do because there were so few tools available. So I'm sure many of you might be familiar with this process. You've got to pick yourself a stack, whether it's PHP, whether it's Rails, whatever your poison is. You need to hire server engineers or delegate these tasks to yourself. You need to pick a provider, somebody to host your servers for you, assuming you don't have your own. Then you need to write your code, test your code, iterate on your code, build new versions, fix bugs. Everybody knows how much fun that can be. And you get to FTP upload or copy upload, however you're going to do it, to a staging environment so you can do more testing. And then you transfer all this to production to get yourself ready to go. Finally, you've got this backend in place and you've got to manage it. You've got to run maintenance on it. You've got to make sure it's up for your users all the time. You've got to make sure it scales as your app begins to grow. And these are all issues that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So for backend as a service systems, kind of the web environment, we've got these great services. I can't speak highly enough about these services. I love them to death. We've got Amazon Web Services that provides things like S3, EC2, Elastic Load Balancer, or Elastic Beanstalk, sorry. They make it very, very easy to deploy web applications. And of course, Heroku, one of the greatest things to happen to web development, in my opinion, in a long time. They make it so easy to just kind of deploy your web application to staging and production environments and manage different versions of your code. So this is all great for web developers, and it's done a lot to create APIs and to develop web services. But there's still something to be desired for us mobile developers, because we still have to go in, we still have to manage these servers, we still have to write all the code, and we still have to manage scaling. Even though it's easier than it used to be, it's still a task, and for small teams, it can be a costly task. So some mobile cloud services that are already available, that have been popping up over the past few years, they solve some of these vertical problems that mobile app developers have been having. So things like analytics. Flurry Analytics has been around for a very long time, and they track all kinds of usage information about your application. We get crash reporting, so criticism. If you haven't heard of it or haven't used it, you should definitely check it out. It's a godsend for being able to find bugs and fix bugs in your application. You also have things like push notifications and Urban Airship, VoIP. Twilio is handling VoIP pretty well, and SMS services and things of that nature. And also beta testing. We have TestFlight to be able to deploy beta tests on the fly. So all of these different services have come up just to solve certain developer problems and make our jobs a little easier as mobile app devs. So what's the missing piece? Developers really still need some way to solve this back-end issue. They still don't want to be able to, they still don't want to have to deploy servers. They still don't want to have to write code. They want something simple. So rather than abstracting server management like Heroku or Elastic Beanstalk do, AMBASS removes the need for servers altogether. So no longer do mobile app devs have to worry about any of this deployment. So what we're seeing in the AMBASS space is that these SDKs and these services are also abstracting a lot of the common functionality that you see among many applications and building it into an SDK. So it's easy to reuse, and it's much easier to deploy these applications and create the common functionality that you use in multiple applications. And the AMBASS service, it was really created with the same intention as what Heroku and Amazon did. They just want to make things a little bit easier to deploy and a little bit faster and cost efficient for their users. So as an app developer, we know that creating all this server code, managing all these backends is tough, and it's going to get expensive. And if nothing else, it's certainly time consuming. And this is very clear for small teams, but you can also see it in large teams as well, who may want to allocate their resources toward fixing bugs or creating new features and not having to worry about all this back-end stuff. And I'm a mobile app developer myself, and I know that you all have enough to worry about. And what we're doing at Kii Cloud is kind of taking all this common functionality and moving it into client-side SDKs. So we have an SDK for iOS, for Android, and for JavaScript. And we also have REST APIs available for developers to utilize. And what this does is it gives you time to focus on building your idea, building new features, focusing on your users, and focusing on your application. So going a little bit deeper onto what AMBASS is doing, it's an instant backend that you can deploy without ever having to write any server code. Like I said, SDKs are available, not just for Kii Cloud, but for all of the users or all of the services in the AMBASS space. And it really just lets you build and iterate your app in a fraction of the time that it would usually take. So one of the key facets is user management, and I'm going to use Kii Cloud as an example, but again, these types of services, this type of functionality, it can be seen in most of the services in AMBASS. So user management, login and registration, these things that every app needs if you want to be social, if you want to retain user information. A lot of them also have social connectivity, so you can log in with your Facebook account, your Twitter account, etc. We've got profiles and management, so managing your account, managing passwords, password resets, email changes, all these things that in the past, they require server APIs for you to write, for you to test, for you to deploy. This all comes out of the box from AMBASS, so you don't have to worry about any of this stuff that you're commonly reusing in multiple applications. So if you can see in the bottom, we've got a couple of code examples for Android and iOS. So what these code examples are doing are creating and registering a user. So if you're building out APIs, if you're building out server code, this is going to be quite a task. But if you're using an AMBASS SDK, you can literally do these in only a couple of lines of code. So it's really making things easy, and it's really encapsulating things all in your client. One of the success stories of an app using AMBASS is one of our client apps at Kii Cloud. And it's a Japanese mobile application. It's a couples SNS. So basically a couples network where you can share, you can chat with your significant other. So they were able to build, design, deploy this entire application in just a matter of a couple of months. So they didn't have to worry about any servers. They just plugged in our AMBASS solution and were able to get up and running and testing and focusing on their user experience rather than focusing on the technology behind it. Another part of most AMBASS services is data management. So this is actually a pretty big one. This is replacing your databases essentially in a server-backed system. So we have object storage, which is essentially JSON-style storage. You can store any kind of key value pair. You can store arrays. You can store dictionaries, anything like this. You can throw it up at our cloud, and we can handle it. And the best thing about this is it's all queryable as well. So you can upload and download all this information at any time. It's also schemaless, so you don't ever have to worry about doing any kind of database migration when you're iterating between versions of the application. We also have file storage, which allows you to upload and download files. You can also share files publicly if you wish. And there are sync services available as well. And on the bottom, we also have some more example code, just so you can see. This is essentially creating a certain type of object. Think of it like a JSON dictionary, and it's saving it to the cloud. And you can do this in 4 or 5 lines of code. So going back to Hug, they also utilize the data management services in our backend. So all of the pictures that users post, all the stories that they post, messages, things like this, it's all uploaded to the cloud, it's all synced between devices and shared between users. So as I mentioned before, analytics is very, very important for most mobile apps, especially those who want to actually turn their app into a business. So when you're looking at users, when you're looking at what they're doing, this helps you guide your application to what users are really expecting and what they're hoping for. And this is a big reason on how so many apps are popular in the App Store, is they're just gauging their users so well and they're seeing what their users are up to. So a lot of AMBASS providers are providing analytics as a core functionality out of the box. And if you use Flurry or something similar, Google Analytics, things like this, you're aware of these kind of vanity metrics, which are how many downloads do I have? How many active users do I have? You know, how many times has this event happened in my app? What's the frequency of a certain kind of task in my application? What we're doing at Kii is actually something a little more interesting. Since we have this object storage in the back end, what we're allowing you to do is actually run analytics on the data that's within your application. So rather than just user actions, we're actually drilling into what data is in the app that users are creating, users are sharing, and you can use this information to help guide your app in the future. And again, Hug, we like them because they use pretty much every part of our cloud. So they also used analytics, and they're running this to help iterate on their application and build it out for their users. The final topic that I'm going to talk about is monetization. So this is more and more important as developers and apps want to grow their business, and honestly, it's pretty tough. So what you can do now is sell advertising, you know, banner ads on your application. The problem with that is this also takes time. So even if you plug in something like AdMob, if you want to really drill down into targeting and really get high CPMs on your ads, you need to have more information that you're sending to the ad network so they know which ads to target to the users. So one of the things that we're doing at Kii Cloud and other AMBASS services is kind of creating a one-stop shop for all of the ad networks. So we're working with a few different ad networks in China, in Japan, in Korea, to give really high-value targeting in a place that a lot of app developers don't really know about. And it's hard for them to get into these markets. So here at the bottom, we also have more code samples. With just 2 lines of code, you can manage ad network weights, and our SDK also handles more advanced targeting, so we can, with just these 2 lines of code, we can figure out the best ad depending on where your user is, depending on the demographics and the profile of your user. So this is another thing that's just trying to make the lives for app developers a little bit easier. And Hug's version of monetization is they offer couples coupons. So they can see trends in a couple's conversation and say, hey, maybe you might like to go out to dinner on Friday night. Let's offer them a coupon. So this is a pretty cool way of monetizing an app that really fits in with the app and is less about banners and more about creating user value. So what's next for AMBASS? You know, where are we going with this? Here's a couple of the providers. Obviously, I'm a little biased toward Kii Cloud, but there are other providers available as well. And many of them offer the same types of services, although there are variations. These are the biggest players in the AMBASS space. So what makes Kii stand out compared to some of these other providers? So a little bit of our history at Kii. We've been doing mobile backup for one of the largest carriers in Japan, NTT Docomo. So they're essentially like a Verizon in Japan. And we've been doing their data backup for a number of years now. So we're taking all this know-how, we're taking this infrastructure and opening it up to app developers such as yourselves. Excuse me. So we're bringing this reliability, this scalability, And this is really carrier grade stuff that we're opening up to any app out of the box for free, essentially. So AMBASS, as it stands right now, it's still very, very young. It's only emerged in the past year and a half or so, and it's growing very fast, and it's also changing very, very rapidly. So it's not perfect yet, and I don't want to try to convince everybody to switch to AMBASS because one size does not fit all. This might not be the best solution for every single application. But what we're seeing is that it can solve a lot of the problems for many applications out there. And you can certainly leverage this technology to save on time no matter what your application is. So like I said, it's still a very, very young space, and new features are constantly rolling out. And what we're doing is we're looking at what apps are doing now, what speed bumps developers are hitting, and how we can help them a little bit better. So we're just trying to make their lives a little bit easier and trying to make the mobile app development process a little more efficient. So we're also keeping up with some of the emerging trends and technologies. So rather than you and your developers having to deal with all this, you can just plug into one single SDK, and you know that we've got your back for all the new emerging trends. So that's all I have. If you want to check out our solution, check out developer.kii.com, and you can get started with Kii Cloud for free. We're in a public beta right now, and if you see me floating around today, feel free to ask me any questions that you might have. And I think we've still got time if anybody has questions now. I'm more than happy to help. Yep. Well, I don't want to drive you away from Kii, but I figured I should. In terms of choosing a provider? All right, so to answer your first question, how do you pick between providers? Uh, like I said, a lot of this functionality is very, very similar across all the providers. So it really comes down to what else do they have to offer. So we at Kii, we've been doing this for a number of years in more of the enterprise world. So if you compare us to one of these startups that's taking funding, might be bought by Google next week, we don't know. You don't have that stability with some of the providers. But we've been around, we're not going anywhere. So you know that your app data is going to be with us and nothing's going to change for a while. So beyond that, what we do at Kii, we have an investment fund. So we've actually invested in and partnered with a lot of different applications that utilize our cloud that we have synergy with. So we also bring that to the table as well. Our know-how and our partnership and even financial capital if needed. So the second part of your question, at what point do you choose to spin up a server on your own? Right? So I think this is a decision that should be made very early on and not later. So I wouldn't suggest starting with an AMBASS solution and then switching to servers. You really need to look at what your core service is. If it's purely mobile, I would recommend AMBASS. But if it's a website with maybe a mobile application on the side, AMBASS might not be the right solution for you. So that's where I would start, but it definitely depends on a case-by-case basis. So if you look at something like Heroku, they make it very easy to kind of scale your website and tie into backends and tie into all these different plugins that they have, right? So if you wanted to use an AMBASS solution, you'd be using the REST SDK or the REST APIs. Right? So rather than doing a database connection, which will be faster and it'll be a little more baked into the service provider that you're using, you would have to make curl calls or some kind of HTTP request over REST. So it would add, you could certainly do it, but in my opinion, I think it might add a little more hassle than what you're looking for. Yes?
got a green light, so I'll keep it. There you go. Do you have any facilities for centrally storing things such as OAuth tokens for social networking sites, like Facebook, Twitter, so you can log them in once and then for a given app be able to access the tokens across multiple devices?
Yeah, so for an example, what we're doing with Facebook right now is we can handle Facebook authentication, and we use that to log the user into the application. And then we give the developer the token so they can make Facebook API calls as they wish, because we don't want to be too intertwined with the Facebook SDK. We just want to be loosely coupled with it. So yeah, we will store the Facebook token, and we will give it back to the developer when you would like to use it. Yeah, for Kii Cloud, we're still pretty new to social, so Facebook is our only one. But Twitter, yeah, like you said, it's the same type of technology. It'll basically just be plug and play from here on out as we start to add social networks. Anybody else? All right, thanks guys.